Welcome to the Subconscious Elements Podcast, a podcast where me and my co-host Tori Setliff talk about all things spirituality, whether that's books, movies, stories, myths, legends, ideas, and concepts. And today's topic is going to be dealing with past trauma, how it manifests in your present relationships, and how to heal. Tori, you want to take it off?
Yeah, so I'm going to start out by defining trauma. And trauma can be defined as a psychological or emotional response to something or one event or multiple events or an ongoing event in your life that happened to you that was distressing. And the mind's way of coping can be in creating habits around that, whether it's disassociation or like the fight or flight response. And so, yeah.
And then we can go into like kind of maybe our own personal trauma, like things that we've experienced and kind of how it affects us to this day. One of the things I think about when we talk about trauma is like there's these hilarious creators on Instagram and they mock like the new generation and they're always using the word trauma. They're like, trauma. It's like, it can definitely be overused, but it is something that we all go through. We all experience different levels of trauma, but essentially it's a important part of life. Like no one goes through life without experiencing it. And if you take the time to get to know people, you'll realize that almost everyone has some type of baggage that they're dealing with on a regular basis. And from what I can tell, it's like almost always you never want anyone else's trauma or baggage. It's like, the first thing that you kind of come to is people want to like brag about the stuff that they've gone through or like almost wear it as a badge. Like, oh, this is what I went through. But the more that you get to know people, you realize like, man, I'm happy with what I got. Like, I don't want anyone else's baggage because you realize that everyone is either going through stuff that's just as bad or worse. And it makes me feel grateful that the stuff that I have is like what I can handle. And it kind of goes into that idea too about like religion, right? Where like, so that's one of the main tenets that they'll talk about a lot is God doesn't give you anything that you can't handle. So it just goes back to that idea of like not passing judgment on other people. And if you understand that a lot of your bad habits and ways that you cope and deal and interact with people, a lot of it comes from your past trauma, you'll start to understand other people better and not judge them for it. I actually saw one on After School. Shout out to After School. This is two of his paintings, two of his art pieces. And he just released something today, I think, or yesterday. And it was understanding the darkness within yourself will allow you to deal with the darkness of others. And, again, that's that full circle of like, when you understand that you act a certain way because of what you've had to deal with, you'll be more empathetic to others who might not act, in a way that you would accept, right? It's like, you can understand like they must be going through something. And there's actually like a huge thing about mental health right now. And one of my buddies said, it's like, you really never know what someone else is going through. So you should be nice to everyone. And I feel like that's kind of right in line with what we're talking about today.
Yeah, for sure.
We could go into, so like specific things that have happened to us that maybe we still deal with today or that have defined us in some certain way. And I'll go ahead and start. But one of the things that I know that has affected me is my dad not being around and also kind of being a scumbag. He would come back sometimes. So like every now and then he'd have like a couple months stint where he was around and then he would disappear again. But like the last time I talked to him, I'm pretty sure was at the end of boot camp. Maybe a little longer than that actually. So it had to have been 2010 or 2011. And one day he just quit answering my phone calls. But before that, I hadn't talked to him a couple years. I think I hung out with him for like 3 months in the summer going into my senior or junior year. And before that, it was like 6 or 7 years. And he was around like when I was, I think middle school or something. And then before that, it was even longer. So we would go legitimately like 6 or more years without seeing him. And then he would come back and try to be in our lives, and then he would disappear again. And I am very fortunate that my mom married a really good person, my stepdad. And, I credit him for a lot of uh, my passion for martial arts. I do remember specifically like growing up that I thought sports were stupid and that all I wanted to do was play video games. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but I definitely love martial arts, and it's been a huge part of my life. And I have to thank my stepdad for that. But just overall, not having your dad, day to day, you don't really think about it, but it always like is in the back of your mind of like, why is he not around? And, not only that, but when you grow up and you're around other people that have dads, you realize like you have certain aspects of your personality that just aren't there because he wasn't around. And like, for example, one of the things that I realized was my work ethic towards like a job. Like any regular job, I literally would never care about it. I would just do what I had to do. And it wasn't until I met someone else that kind of took his job way too seriously, I realized it came from his dad. And I've been able to kind of like see that in others now, where if you have a dad, most likely he taught you about like work ethic and the importance of responsibility and doing the things that you have to do to provide. And that's something that I've almost never had. Luckily for me, I was able to join the Marine Corps, and it wasn't from my own decision. I honestly believe I got lucky and I had the right people around me that influenced me to do something that I would never myself do. And that helped too. The Marine Corps taught me to carry my own weight and a little more. So that's helped me. But as far as like, taking, like having passion for your job, and not just like job, but like this idea that the way you do one thing is the way that you do everything, and you should have pride in your work, whether it's trivial or not. That's something I've never had. And I remember this one interaction I had with this individual who took his job way too seriously, and he wasn't liked amongst the people that worked. It was at an airport, and he would just get all worked up when something didn't go right, and then would start cussing and stuff. And one time he thought he was going to cuss at me, and I got in his face. And needless to say, like, he wasn't ever going to cuss at me again. But it was funny. At the time, I smoked a lot of weed, so he wanted to buy weed from me, and he was so scared of me that he asked one of the guys I was friends with to ask me if I would give him some. And I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. And so then I'm sitting in the truck with this guy, and he's like talking about why the way he is, the way that he is. And it was because his dad was such a dick. And he was just saying that it wasn't specifically what he told me. It was like, I could sense it. It's like, this dude did not like his dad, And I could see that like the way that he reacts at the job is like a direct manifestation of him working with his dad, like maybe when they're growing up, like who knows? But I could just see it's like, oh man, that's why the dude is the way he is. And I realized then myself, I'm so careless because I didn't have a dad, and not careless in general, but I just didn't care. It's like, dude, this job is not worth us freaking out, And in that moment, I had empathy for him. To a dude that I was ready to punch in the face at one moment, all of a sudden I was like, I felt bad for him. I was like, I'm glad I didn't have some dickhead dad over the top of me, bossing me around all the time and yelling at me for whatever reason. And I'm telling you, when something, because we worked at an airport and we would be like moving bags and stuff, and God forbid a bag was missing or something, this dude would have a complete, like, be flipping around and just yelling at himself. And we always thought it was funny. We'd make fun of him. We literally would just make fun of him all the time. But yeah, and one day he thought he was going to yell at me. And I was like, dude, you got the wrong guy. But yeah, so that's one aspect of me realizing not having a dad, of like this very important idea that young men need to have, right? Like, luckily for me, I was in the Marine Corps, but not everyone gets that. Not everyone has like the opportunity to go to the military and learn those skills. So that's one thing that I've identified within myself, and there's more, and I'm still learning about it. But again, just that idea of seeing what someone else went through, and then all of a sudden, like, it's like after that day, we were cool. It was like I didn't really have anything against them anymore, and I wouldn't say we were friends, but we were definitely cordial. When before it was like things were dicey, and it always reminds me of this movie, Kicking and Screaming, with not Seth Rogen. It's the other guy. Um, One of the other famous actors. It's about soccer, and he's a dad. And in the very beginning of the movie, he's like narrating him being born. So it shows like a baby, and he goes, "And there I was with a clean slate, ready to start my life until I met this guy." And it's his dad. And he grows up with his dad, and his dad's a one-upper, always one-upping him, telling him that he's never good enough and that no matter what he does, he's always going to beat him. And I remember watching that movie, just like I'd seen it before, but didn't pick up on that part. But I remember watching it like a couple years back and just watching it. And I was like, man, I actually do feel kind of lucky that I didn't have like, it's like you come into this world and you want to have, create a life for yourself, but you really are like, you're immediately downloaded with the baggage of your parents. And I almost, at that moment, I saw myself as fortunate that I didn't have some dickhead dad over me. I could only, like, being friends with a one-upper, even having a one-upper around at work is almost unbearable. Imagine growing up with one as a dad. That'd be impossible. But people do it. So anyways, it's a funny thing that I go through.
Yeah, I would say in the same sense that you grew up without a dad, your mother also had to raise you to 2 boys by herself
Yeah.
and trying to play the role of the loving, compassionate mother and also, like, the discipline and the father is, like, 2 roles. So, almost inevitably, it sets that person up for failure because they can only, uh, raise you with so much.
Yeah. My mom had to have 3 jobs. And so me and my brother spent a lot of time by ourselves growing up. It was literally just me and my brother every day. And my mom wouldn't get home till super late. And she would just go straight to her room and go to sleep. We would literally survive off ramen noodles and weenies, beans and weenies. Like whatever we could heat up in a microwave is what we ate. Again, not having that second parent around. And then, yeah, the way, it affects her. I remember one time we were in front of like a therapist or a psychologist or something, and he was like asking us to help our mom, and our mom was crying. But we were so young, we just didn't get it. And it's like, dude, what are you talking about? We just want to play video games. But yeah, and yeah, it was super tough.
Yeah, my brother, he's a single parent to 2 boys also, and he or his kids, my nephews, they never had a mother around. So 2 boys growing up without a mother and just having someone, like, telling them what to do instead of, like, whenever they get hurt, someone being there for them and, like, wiping their tears is like, "Just get over it," type of mentality. And he was always, like, the tough parent, like, disciplining them and telling them right from wrong, but they lacked that a lot. Like, I remember my youngest nephew, he would always call me mom, and I'm like, "I'm not your mom," and he'd be like, "Mom." And so it's just, like, really sad to see that, but and who knows how it'll, like, manifest later in their lives, like, growing up without that in the early years.
Yeah. Another thing I remember too was growing up, and one of my buddies was like, "Dude, you got to shave your face, dude. It looks like shit." And I mean, we had to have been like 13 or 14. And I literally had just a disgusting, like, caterpillar mustache. And yeah, I had to teach myself how to shave. No one taught me how. It's like something so innocuous and little, but it's like how many different things, could a dad have shown me if I had one around. And again, I found myself very fortunate that I had some really cool friends that kind of watched out for me and helped me grow up a little bit. Somehow I was able to get into a decently cool crowd. And honestly, one of my buddies, he just like liked me for whatever reason, and he was really cool. And so he kind of helped me uh, grow up a little bit, because before he was my friend, I had no friends. Because no joke, I was just a bad. Not only was I as a class clown, but I wasn't good at it either. So I used to steal things when I was younger too, because I felt like I never had anything. So I would constantly steal stuff. And if you can imagine, that doesn't get you a good reputation amongst your peers. And so, yeah, no joke, I literally didn't have any friends until my freshman year. This dude showed up at our school, and he was a kid he was a freshman with us, but for whatever reason, he had seniors as friends. He hung out with adults. Like, he was way ahead of his time. And he was easily one of the most popular kids in school. And he literally picked me as his best friend. And I have no idea why. I honestly think it was because of loyalty. I wasn't playing social games like most people were. Most people, because they had friends, were maybe acting some type of way, but not me. I was just glad to just have a friend who, was willing to talk to me. So, yeah, it's always funny, like looking back on it and how it's like shaped me, and just like how your past like shapes the way that you think.
Yeah, for sure. I think we should bring up our past traumas and how it affects our relationship directly.
Yeah.
So whenever Scott and I first met, we were both, well, personally, I was engaged and that did not work out. So I was coming out of a very long relationship and I was planning on marrying the person. And so I was moving into a new apartment, starting fresh on my own. And that's kind of whenever I met Scott. So it was like pretty close after the fact that we had broken up. So I definitely had not healed any of that. I just kind of like pretended I was fine and just moved on in my own mind. I was like, oh yeah, it's fine. And then just thinking to myself, like, there's definitely some stuff that I'm not processing. And yeah, Scott came out of a long-term relationship as well at the same time. And we just moved in together within like 2 weeks of knowing each other. And so if you can imagine, that's definitely a huge step for most people. Most people don't move in after years of knowing each other, but we moved in only after a couple weeks just because he needed a place to stay, I needed a place to stay, and it would make rent cheaper. So we were like, yeah, might as well. And I remember whenever we first met, we basically wanted to be like a thing, but we also didn't want to be a thing at the same time. So it's like we were dating and we didn't want either one of us to see anyone else, but also we weren't really like technically claiming each other in the way that you would traditionally do so in a relationship. And I feel like that has to do with the fact that we were just out of a relationship and we weren't really ready for a commitment, but we also didn't really want the other person to try things with other people. So
I felt betrayed by my girlfriend at the time because I was chasing my dream of being a professional jiu-jitsu athlete. And I mean, I think I just got my purple belt. So I'm still, relatively new. I'd been competing for a while. I had a bunch of tournaments as a white belt. I spent like 5 years as a white belt. And I got out of the military to do martial arts. I wanted to make a living doing martial arts. And so I was chasing that dream, and I kept quitting jobs to just try to just do that full time, content create and do jujitsu and stuff. One of the things that she wanted from me was she wanted to get married and have kids, and I just was not there yet mentally. Well, actually, we were married. We had gotten married to the military because it made sense financially, but we weren't there as far as like we didn't actually act like we were a wife and husband. We had just did it so life could be easier for the both of us. And then, yeah, she wanted me to have kids with her, and I just was not there. I was trying to, chase my own dreams. I just didn't feel like I was ready, and it just wasn't something that I was prepared to do. And it was she was putting time frames on me, and that was just like, she was a little older than me as well. And so in her mind, she had a clock ticking. For me, I felt like my life was just starting. I just got out of the military. The last thing I wanted to do was have a kid. I wanted to just do the things that I didn't have a chance to do while I was serving. And she came up with this brilliant idea of like, oh, I'm going to break up with you and kick you out and make you be on your own for 6 months. And then, and this is what she told me. I have no idea how much truth there is to it, but she was like, oh, I just wanted to break up for like 6 months so you'd grow up and then we'd get back together. And in my mind, I was like, fuck you. There's no way. Like, you're going to you think that by breaking up with me, I'm going to want you back. I was like, in my mind at the time, I was like, you lost your mind. I was like, no way. And, yeah, I just became I just like started working at Title Boxing, which is where I met Tori. And I was determined to be, a champion in jiu-jitsu. And I just didn't feel like I could do that with a regular job. Like that's what she wanted me to do. She wanted me to work for the man, have a regular job, and provide and give her kids. And I just wasn't there. I wanted to be an athlete. I wanted to train all the time. The last thing I was trying to do was work for the man, have a 9-to-5 job. And, good or bad, I did a lot of psychedelics. Not a lot, but psychedelics was something that I always wanted to do when I got out of the military. So when I did, I would have psychedelic trips. And one of my trips, I just saw myself living the same day. I lived like a 3-year life in about a span of a couple hours. And it just felt like every day I was doing the same thing, which was, because I did have a job for a while. Like I was working at a pizza restaurant and I was making decent money. And there was a possibility of me being a manager and moving up. And I remember taking some LSD one time and falling asleep, which is really hard to do. I don't know how I did that. I literally was so tired and I thought I'd put it in my mouth and it would wake me up. And I ended up falling asleep while I was tripping. And so I had this dream that I lived the same day for 1,000 days. And essentially it was just work. I would get up, work, come home, watch Netflix, go to bed. And it was that for however many, in my mind, it was 1,000 days. So about 3 years. And I just realized like I did not want to do that. And at the time, that's what I was doing. I was working. I would lift. So I was still in good shape. I would lift when I could. I lifted pretty regularly and I would train when I could, train jiu-jitsu. But it was more of like, I never felt like I had enough time to do the training that I wanted to do. It was always like there was no passion behind it. It was just like fitting it in when I could. And, just like anything, you always need more money. So I had to pick up extra shifts and then you don't work out and then you're eating. Like when you work all day, you just like stuff yourself. You just want to stuff yourself and watch TV. And I just remember living that and I was just like, that is not what I want to do. I do not want to work all day, come home, stuff my face and watch Netflix. I want to do jiu-jitsu. I want to lift. I want to be in shape. I want to be a killer. I want to be a savage. And being a restaurant manager and, watching Netflix every day was not it. And I also remember too, is like, the idea of having fun at the time would be like going out to a restaurant and spending a bunch of money and eating a bunch of food. And it's like, at the time, that just wasn't appealing to me. And that like pushed me into the idea of just being that I have to chase my dreams of making money some other way. And now, unfortunately, at the time, being a full-time jiu-jitsu athlete, content creator still was relatively new and not a thing. So, I mean, now it's probably way more reasonable for someone to make that decision. And also, I was a little older too. I wasn't as young as some of these kids that are starting now. I think I made the decision to be a world champion, that I wanted to be a world champion at 26 as a blue belt. And that's old. Like, in my mind, I was still young, but just overall, like the way that kids are training these days, 26 is old. It's too late. The guys at the top of the sport, they're 26 as multiple year black belts. And so you just don't have the time. You don't have the time and the skill to catch up with someone who's been training since they were 13 years old or even younger. So, anyways, main point of the story was that she wanted things from me that I was not in a state that I could provide those things. And she thought that she was going to manipulate me into getting there. And I was hard headed and stubborn. And I was like, you lost your mind. There's no way I'm doing that. And then so when I literally met Tori like right after. And yeah, we were just both in a position where we kind of needed support. And I just remember being like, I felt so betrayed by her. And I remember one of my buddies telling me too, he was like, dude, she's been planning this for a while. This isn't random. And it kind of like all clicked. I was like, because she had been taking more and more trips home to see her family and stuff. And I just remember him being like, girls don't plan these things by themselves, dude. She's been planning this for a while. And I just remember feeling betrayed. I was like, I just remember being like, F that bitch. And so the last thing I wanted to do is be in another relationship. Because I was just like, all women are going to want something from me that I'm not ready to provide. I was like, I'm here to be a champion. I'm here to make my life in jiu-jitsu, and either you're with me or you're not. And yeah, because of that, I didn't want to put a title on the relationship because I felt like, well, if I start calling my girlfriend, and then she's going to want other things from me. I just like truly believe that all the women, all they're going to want to do is get married and have kids. And I was like, I'm not doing that. So you can be my friend and you can hang out if you want or not.
Yep. And yeah, we just called each other friends for forever. I think we still call each other friends, but
Yeah.
I'm like, what's up, friend? And then it's like just a thing that we do now. So it's pretty funny. Instead of being like, hey, baby, or hey, babe.
Yeah, we call each other. Well, I still call you babe sometimes, but yeah, most of the time we call each other friend.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say also I wasn't really wanting a super serious relationship at the time either. And we weren't even sure if we were going to be together. So we were just kind of like, yeah, we'll just see how long this goes. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, whatever type of thing. And so, yeah, we had lots and lots of arguments in the beginning, I remember. It was like a lot of us threatening to move out and stuff like that. And so, yeah, my past relationship, I just kind of got like a sign that I shouldn't be in that relationship. And that was just like a part of my journey. Um, the person that I was with, he had a lot of mental issues and he was very suicidal and very, like, I would say psychologically and physically abusive. He would like break my things, like anything that I really liked, he would just break it. And I didn't really trust him. Like, I was like, well, if he's acting this way now, he wants kids. What is he going to act like when we have kids? I was like, I don't want my kids to be around someone like that. It was like super volatile and like almost bipolar. Like one minute he was super nice and then he would explode and then he would try to like make up for it. And yeah, it would just be a super repetitive pattern. And it just progressively kept getting worse and worse and worse. And I was like, it's time for me to go. Like, I can't stay here. And it took a while for me to make that decision. And even when I made that decision, I was still like second guessing myself. But eventually, after moving out, yeah, I really wasn't ready for a relationship. I was like, well, what if this guy's the same thing? And then you just have that in the back of your mind. It's like, we didn't even really know each other and we were living together. And so we didn't really know what to expect, And
Essentially, it led to like having issues,
trust issues, for sure.
and not willing to commit to each other because both of us were just worried about, like I was with what's her face for like 6 years, five or 6 years. And then out of nowhere, she's going to try to play mind games with me. So I felt like that was like a possibility where I was like, I'll commit to her. And then next thing I know, she's going to want to play mind games with me because I don't want to give her what she wants.
Yeah, I think we both probably played mind games with each other for sure in the beginning. But regardless of that, I think it also we did some positive things together for sure. Like he introduced me to martial arts. I really got into that because I wanted to learn self-defense because something else really traumatic happened in my life and I was still coping from that. And martial arts really helped me, like, understand the importance, that can come from self-defense and the confidence that comes with it also, and knowing that you can control the situation and you don't have to be a victim of a situation.
That's like one of the ways it would manifest in a relationship. But a lot of the times, yeah, these things like manifest in a bunch of different ways, essentially the way that you cope with trauma, you'll use that as a way to cope with like any type of stressful situation. And like one thing that I know that I'll admit now is like when we get into arguments, I would just one of the ways that how do I say it? Like, I guess when I get triggered, one of the ways that I'll, what's another word? It's not react, but
I feel like you do get in a reactive state.
well, I'm thinking of a word.
It's a synonym for react.
Yeah.
Respond.
Yeah. Maybe respond. Yeah. So I guess respond, react. Can't really think of it at the moment, but one of the ways that I'll react to like stressful situations, like in arguments, is like I'll call her names. Like I'll just try to think of the meanest things I can say to her.
And that triggers me so much.
Thinking about it now, that comes from just like, I can see that it comes from one, I've seen that before. So I've obviously like, it's a learned behavior. And then also it's like, not having a dad, there's no one there to tell you to not do that, and, it's funny. I don't want to announce it right now. I mean, this podcast won't come out till later.
Yeah, I know that's what I was thinking too, but
we can announce it. I mean,
okay, it's fine.
yeah. So, crazy announcement. Tori is prego. So yeah, that in of itself has been a spiritual experience for us both. But one of the things that I realized is that like, one, the level of love that you have for someone like skyrockets. Like I can't even put like how much did it increase? I have no idea, but it's like a whole deeper level of love that I have for Tori now. And one of the first things that kind of comes to my mind is like, I would never want to say anything mean to her because of what she's doing for us as a family. But before, I'd never had that feeling before. And so it's funny, like now I almost feel like I don't have the desire. Now, I'm not saying that I won't do it again, but I felt it inside me to not want to do it. And before, I would have a reason as to why I did it. Well, like, I would blame her for why I would call her mean names. I'm like, oh, well, you're doing this to me, and I'm just, you troll me in this way, so I troll you in this way. And yeah, again, now that she's going to be the mother of my child, now I can see that I would never want to call her a mean name ever. And so, back to, how past traumas can manifest in your current relationship, like that reactive state of just being like, F you, you stupid B word, that is 100% just me being in a reactive state and looking for ways to dump my baggage onto you. And so that's like one of many things, like a coping mechanism, you could say, that I have. And, again, finding out that she is pregnant and stuff, and we're kind of going through this journey together, I like realize that is something I have to heal, because I don't want to be calling, the mother of my child mean names, because I also wouldn't want him to think about saying something like that, So it's definitely been an interesting and wild journey so far, and it just started.
Yeah, my mom, she used to call me mean names whenever I was going through middle school and high school. And it was like the first time I've ever heard like really derogative names towards females, like the word slut or cunt or bitch. Like I'd never heard that before. And my mom used to call me those names, and I didn't even really technically understand what those words meant. I just knew that they were mean. And I used to call people those same names in high school, and it used to cause like really big problems. So where it'd be like, they'd tell the teacher, and then the teacher would be like, "Why would you do that?" And it's just like, I don't know. I just thought maybe I should call her that. It's like, you don't even understand why you do it. Or like, you don't even dislike the person. You're just saying it because someone said it to you. And you don't even understand the meaning behind it or what that means to that person that you're saying it to, or the way that it's being interpreted by someone that actually understands. And so obviously I don't call people names anymore, but that was whenever I was a lot younger. But I still do think about that sometimes. I'm like, man, I was pretty mean to that person. It's like I didn't even know I was being mean. I mean, I knew it, but I didn't really know it, So yeah, the names definitely triggered me. It's like whenever we're arguing, it'll be about something very specific, but then if he calls me a name, the argument automatically goes to the fact that he called me a mean name, and then it gets sidetracked. And then we'll be arguing about him calling me a mean name or using curse words, which is also a trigger. Like, I don't like when people curse at me. And then the argument will get sidetracked onto that, and it'll be like, that wasn't the point of the argument. I'm like, well, it's the point of the argument now.
Well, there wasn't a point to the argument, which is why I started calling her new names, just to get very specific.
Yeah, we'd probably argue about literally nothing. I don't even remember right now.
I would argue about something. So I think women in general tend to do this. And it's like that. There's this idea that women argue emotionally and men argue logically. And either, both, there's a middle, right? Like, because the guys think like, oh, women aren't logical, but there is an emotional side to things. So you can't like ignore the emotion. So there's like the best way to handle things, you have to be aware of both. There has to be logic and reason, and then you also have to understand each other's emotions. But yeah, women in general will tend to just make things about the way that they feel and emotional. And a lot of times, like women in general, I feel like don't want to confront the problem instead. So they beat around the bush. And then so you'll be arguing with a woman about whatever, and you'll be trying to use reason and logic, and they'll make it about something else because they don't really want to come forward with whatever is being talked about. And that can be really frustrating when you're trying to, in your mind, settle something, or like you're trying to get to the root of the problem. And a lot of times your female partner will want to avoid the problem. And this isn't a Tory thing. This is a legitimate woman thing. And so instead of confronting the stress or perceived danger, especially when it comes to like arguing with words, they'll find ways to kind of like distract in the argument. And that can be really frustrating when you're trying to get to a resolution. And it feels like the other person doesn't want a resolution. They just want to get you to get mad about anything. Like women will have ways of triggering you. Like they find ways of making you lose your mind without necessarily, like women do it without saying mean words. They just say like things that they know will absolutely drive you insane. And in our minds, we see things in a direct line. So when you find that they're like shifting blame or whatever, or like they're shifting the conversation, they're shifting the blame, they're shifting what you're talking about, it builds frustration. And so if you can imagine, like, it's just like two different ways, both people being in a reactive state, right? Where essentially both are, maybe there is an issue, but in your own ways, you're not even getting to the issue. So it just like blows up into a huge argument that maybe the original reason doesn't even warrant that much anger or frustration.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I definitely feel that's true. I don't feel like I do that as much anymore because I feel like I'm a lot more direct. Like if I have a problem, I'm just going to say it. But before, if I had a problem, I wouldn't even really understand what the problem is. I would just know that there's a problem and I didn't like something. And then I would just like create chaos because I felt like there was chaos somewhere. or a reason for it. And so that comes with like broadening your awareness and being aware of the issues that arise and not just like pushing them to the side in your mind, but also like trying to understand why this thing is bothering you and then getting the other perspective from the other person. As opposed to like, you kind of like set up traps and you want them to like fall into telling you something that they wouldn't normally tell you, but you get the truth from them because you think that they're not going to tell you the truth, so you set up ways around the truth that make them tell you information that they wouldn't forthgive willingly. So I feel like that's the thing that a lot of women do. They set up like ways in a conversation for a man to like tell them something that they wouldn't usually say. I can feel that's definitely true with people that are being dishonest in relationships. And if you've had someone in a past relationship that has been lying to you or very dishonest with you, it can become like a habit of communication and like, oh, they're not going to tell me the truth, so I have to set up ways for them to get the truth. And it can definitely cause a lot of destruction in that way, where you, like, if you just give them the opportunity to tell you the truth in the beginning, then that fosters a whole different conversation where it's like you approach the thing completely different. You're like, hey, this is bothering me. Can we talk about it? Instead of like sidestepping and trying to maneuver around the situation.
Yeah. This idea this idea that, we might be having a kid soon. Again, like I said, it's been a whole spiritual experience, but one of the things that is like a big deal is, what kind of kid are you going to have? You have a boy or a girl? And so obviously I want a boy, but there's a possibility I'll have a girl. So, thinking about what that would be. And this applies to both genders, obviously, but it's definitely heavily seen in women. Most women grown up and they're not held accountable for the mistakes that they make or the things that they do. And if you're a girl and you're listening to this and that upsets you, I'm sorry. That doesn't mean I'm specifically talking about you, but it's definitely known in the human consciousness that women will blame everyone but themselves. And guys do this too. I definitely know some guys that never take responsibility, but it's heavily seen in women because women are more likely to have someone help them through everything. And so if I do have a girl, I actually would be excited to create a capable woman who takes responsibility. Like, there's this joke that like, oh, if a girl crashes a car, it's everyone else's fault but her own. Like, she'll never take responsibility for whatever happened. And I see that in my day-to-day life. Almost every time someone cuts me off, it's a chick. Like, just pulling out in front of other people like, oh, it's someone else's problem. And yeah, it goes back to this idea that women are less likely to confront stressful situations head on, right? Whereas a guy, you're more likely to do that because no one's going to help you. So if you don't, people are less likely to help you if you're a male, right? So a lot of times males have no choice but to figure out their own bullshit or take responsibility because you're just not going to make it very far as a dude. You're not getting far in this life as a dude if you don't take responsibility. And so again, just like this idea that I could have the opportunity to raise someone who is, aware and more likely to take responsibility than the average person kind of excites me. But again, that I do feel like that's one of the more prevalent things in the female consciousness. And that's to, again, either avoid the problem or blame others for the problem. And again, yeah, I can't remember why I was saying this, but yeah, I guess just this idea of like having the opportunity to help someone not have that issue, I guess is kind of exciting because, yeah, I think it would be awesome to have a super responsible woman who doesn't immediately look for someone to help them out of every situation And I'm pretty sure we all know someone that's like that, right? It's just like, oh, something bad happened, somebody help me. Uh, and coming from like a Marine Corps background, that's like super frustrating because, it's like, again, back to the military mindset is carry your weight and a little more. And when someone doesn't carry their weight, it's seen as like an insult. So, yeah.
Yeah, like I said, the martial arts has definitely helped me with that. Because whenever you are grappling, if you're not the better opponent, then you have to cope with that fact and you are subjective to whatever happens and you just have to try your best and inevitably you'll be submitted, but through that process, you learn that you have the power to learn and you have the ability to get better so these things don't continue to happen and that you can defend yourself in those ways.
Martial arts is like one of the most prominent ways of learning that the only one who's going to help you is you. Like no one can help you be better at martial arts. No one can help you out of a situation. It's like, even in injuries, it's hard to accept that it's no one else's fault but your own if you get injured. But yes, can there be crazy people that do dumb shit that get you hurt? 100%. But a lot of the times you get hurt is because you're either grappling emotionally or maybe a bigger, heavier opponent that you're rolling with. Maybe they did hurt you, but you were taking it to them. There's a lot of times, like if I feel like someone's going to hurt me, I have to figure out a way to move so that I don't hurt myself. And it's like, if it's always someone else's fault, if it's always the fat guy's fault, then you're just never going to be able to roll with a fat guy, which is kind of silly. It's like you can roll with bigger people, but you have to move a certain way. You have to, like for example, like one of the times I popped my rib going against a fat guy, this guy was known for hurting people, but in the moment, I do know that I was like, fuck this guy. Like right before my rib popped, I was like, I can't believe this fat bastard's being fat. And I remember like trying to do a move and it popped my rib. And for sure he was being a fatty, but at the end of the day, I didn't have to take it to him to that level. Like it's because I met him with the same force that he was giving me is the reason I got hurt. And I try to take that mindset in every type of grappling situation. It's like, it definitely takes two to tango. But if you can feel the energy, you can avoid it long before it gets there. Because a lot of times the reasons we hurt ourselves is because we're like, oh no, F this person. I'm going to do this. Or I ain't letting them do this to me. I remember that's what it was. This dude was like sprawling on me and was just using all of his weight. And I was like, you ain't about to use all your weight on me, dude. Pop, gives out my rib. And and it's not necessarily that they don't have responsibility in the injury, but I find if you take responsibility for it for yourself, you're much more likely to learn to move in a way that doesn't get you an injury the next time. You're going to solve the problem. Whereas if you blame the other person, then you're just setting yourself up for another person to do the same thing to you. It's like there are people who complain about injuries, but most of the time, if they're blaming someone else, it's like almost all the time you can be like, yeah, dude, well, you were also going crazy. You were huffing and puffing and sweating and trying to do what it is that you wanted to do. But if you were more relaxed and didn't have an attachment on what you were trying to do, then maybe you wouldn't have been in that position in the first place. So like an example, like, if someone like hurts you with a leg lock, like, oh, he cranked on a leg lock and it's like, well, you could have tapped a lot sooner. A lot of times people will only give you the pressure. It's very rare that someone just like out of nowhere just cranks on something. A lot of times it's like both people were going super intense and the other person felt like they had to tap you. So then they went hard on the submission and you didn't tap fast enough. And that's why you got hurt. But you blame them for taking it a step further than you were. But up until that point, y'all are both even. And it's like at any moment when you feel something going up, you can always back down. And it's our unwillingness to back down that could have prevented, or it's the unwillingness to back down that got us hurt. And it's like, if you feel it going higher and higher, it's like you can just take it back down. And it's hard to do that because we want to win. We want to do the techniques that work. We want to do what's in our mind. But our attachment to what we want to do is oftentimes what can hurt us. And if you learn to see it coming before it comes, you can mitigate it. And, it's hard to do because you have to go softer. You're going to have to let them get certain positions. And, I can understand not wanting a much bigger opponent on top of you, smushing you. But if you can learn to just accept it, you're going to get hurt a lot less. So it's like, even though, yeah, this person might have done something to cause the injury, but if you can just take a look at yourself on what could you have done to prevent it? A lot of times, if you just would have like backed off the intensity a little sooner, then you could prevent those types of things. And so it kind of goes back to that idea of whether something is your fault or not, you have a part to play in it no matter what. And if you can take that as priority first, like what is it can I do that would have changed the scenario so that it wouldn't have happened, you're way more likely to prevent it from happening in the future. Because again, if it's always someone else's fault, then it'll just happen again with someone else.
Yeah, for sure. Unfortunately, I think that process has to be learned mostly. It's like a trial by fire thing. Like you can only know how to do that once you've experienced something that leads you to the revelation. So without getting to that point, you won't really know how to prevent it. So typically that process comes after something happens. So unless you have a really good mentor that you honestly trust and listen to. But typically the advice just goes in one ear and out the other if you don't have any real life experience to base it off of. So, yeah, but I think that can apply to more than just jujitsu or martial arts. We were talking about it last night where I was like, oh, well, everything happens for a reason. And he was saying that he doesn't really like that saying because that doesn't allow you to take responsibility for what happens. And I understand that. I definitely think that we come into this life with like a certain contract and like there's certain things for us to learn, but just going through the life without the awareness can allow you to just be the victim of the life without creating consciously what you want in the life. So changing that mindset of like, yeah, everything happens for a reason, but I do have the opportunity to make what I want happen in every moment happen. And you always have that ability in every moment to bring that awareness and choose the reality that you want for yourself in the future rather than falling into a bad behavior, bad pattern.
Yeah, that's a really good example of this idea of like the idea of polarity, the idea of extremes, and that, no one thing is a single truth. I definitely agree that everything happens for a reason. That is a good way to understand that you can't be attached to outcomes, right? That if something happens, it was meant to be, let it happen and accept what has happened, right? Like a lot of times people can cause themselves a lot of distress and anxiety because they are unwilling to accept something that happened. And so that is a good saying to learn to accept what has happened and move on or act accordingly with what has happened. Because if you're too caught up about the past of what happened, you're not going to be able to make a proper decision going forward. But it goes back to that you still have to make an appropriate decision going forward. And what can happen is I think they call it spiritual bypassing. Like that is a good term for that saying is a good example of spiritual bypassing, where it's like, oh, I'm spiritual. Everything happens for a reason. But people will then use that to negate their own responsibility in any given situation. And so, yes, I do believe that everything happens for a reason. So like this idea, like for example, it plays in martial arts. Like if you lose a tournament, it's not the end of the world. It's okay. There's always going to be another one. Maybe you weren't meant to win this time. You can win the next one. But at that same time, you don't want to be the guy that's just like, oh, it doesn't matter if I win or lose, bro. It's like, no, it definitely does matter. You definitely need to be hungry to win. But you don't want to hold yourself to such a standard of winning that you have a meltdown if you lose. So it's always a balance, like what I was saying about polarity. Yes, everything does happen for a reason, but we also have our own responsibility in each event that happens, right? So it was meant to happen, but it was meant to happen so that you could then take a look at it and figure out what it is that you did wrong and what can you do better for the next time, right? It's meant to, failure is meant to lead you to the right thing. But if you never take a look back and figure out what you did wrong because it was just meant to happen and then whatever, then again, I just see too many people that just go through life and be like, oh, I guess that was just, it's meant to be. And then they don't do anything about it. And it's like, that's how you get pushed around by life. It's like, you have to then analyze the situation and make the appropriate corrections so that you give yourself a better shot the next time, whether it's job interviews or competitions or relationships, right? Like that example of like everyone always blames the other person in the relationship, like, oh, my ex did this, my ex did that, but everyone has their own complicit actions in each of the relationship. Like no one is completely innocent, just like that, takes two to tango. So I think I made my point, right? Like it's a balance of both. That's like the idea of polarity. It's like, yeah, when you say an extreme, it can definitely help you understand one perspective, but there's the opposite is also true. And the middle will be closer to the truth than any one thing.
What's that movie with the race car driver?
The race car driver or the race car?
The race car driver. And he like loses his mind because he loses that tournament to like the French guy.
Oh yeah, you're talking about Talladega Nights?
Yeah. That's like a perfect example of like him putting himself to such a high standard, and then whenever he like fails to reach that standard, he literally goes into like a psychotic episode where he's like streaking and like cannot function normally any longer, and the other guy's just like taunting him and just making him feel worse. And I feel like that's definitely true with like things that replay in our own minds, like things that someone said to you and you just can't let go and it just keeps replaying. I feel like that was a perfect example of like the French guy keep appearing in his life and just like causing him rage and causing him like explosive attitudes and reactions. So
yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, he was so attached to his persona of winning and being number one that when he loses, he can't accept responsibility of his own mistakes. And so it's like everyone else's fault. And like the scene one of the scenes is he keeps wrecking the car and he believes he's on fire. And he's like, help me, Tom Cruise, help me over with your voodoo magic. Yeah. And then he goes, he believes he's crippled. And he's like, Ricky Bobby, you're not crippled. Your legs work just fine. He's like, he grabs a knife and he's like, I'm crippled. I'll stab myself right now. And he's like, here you two sit, so privileged with your legs, walking around. He's like, I hope you both have sons who experience what it's like to be crippled. And then the guy, I forget his name. I'm pretty sure he passed away, but he's like, don't you put that evil on me, Ricky Bobby. Don't you put that evil on me. Yeah, classic movie. I don't even know if you finished it or not, but that's such a killer movie.
yeah, he like loses his wife, and like one thing that could have been just a small blip in his life, he created to be something crazy and huge. Like just accepting the loss and moving on, like everyone has setbacks, and just accepting it and then moving forward. But he created it to be this whole big thing, lost his wife.
Well, he was unwilling to accept that the other guy was actually better, right? So he's like injured. So one, he allows his arm to get broken by the guy. And it's such a classic scene. But then like he's at the practice runway or whatever, and he's in a cast, and the other guy like breaks a record, and he's like, no, put me in the car, and absolutely has to like get on the track to try to beat the guy, and he's like not in a position to even race because his arm's broken, but then he tries it anyway, and then has another wreck, and that's when he runs around all naked and then believes he's crippled. But it was his unwillingness to accept the events like drove him crazy.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, classic movie. Good recall. So you want to get to the healing portion?
Yeah.
All right. So healing, like how do we overcome these things? How do we heal from these trauma. One, acknowledging and identifying that you have unhealthy patterns or reactive states to these things is the first step, right? So if you're not aware that you do these things and that they are happening because of something that happened to you in your past, you're not even able to deal with it. So, and obviously if you're in a relationship with someone, that's the most immediate person that will notice your reactive patterns and reactive states. And it can almost be a trigger in of itself to identify someone's pattern. Like when someone else like lets you know what you do wrong, it can be triggering. But if you are humble enough, or if you're able to at least understand that you have that, then you can at least go back and identify possibly where it came from. And if you can identify where it came from, you can have an understanding of why you do it to begin with. And that in of itself is healing. Like just being aware that, oh, this happened to me, and that's why I tend to do these types of things. And that knowledge will let you know, it's like, well, I don't want to let this thing that happened to me long ago define who I am. And that can be one of the first steps into healing said pattern, right? As far as like spirituality goes, they'll tell you shining the light of consciousness on the dark spots of your ego will illuminate them and heal them. And that might mean like, whoa, what does that mean? And it essentially just means bringing awareness that exists within you. And by ourselves, it's really hard to even notice that exists. And so you can almost see yourself as fortunate if you do have a partner who is willing to bring it up, because then, at least you can then know that it's there. Again, it being brought up, especially when a lot of times it won't only get brought up when emotions are high. So that makes it even more triggering. But if you can, it might be difficult in the moment to do that. But if you can like take a moment to like go back and think about how things can different, again, like take that responsibility, you have a chance at bringing awareness to the pattern and therefore giving you an opportunity to change it. And I feel like we're pretty good about it. What does good mean? But we've definitely helped each other notice destructive patterns that we do. And we've definitely come a long way than when we first started. Like when we first started dating, we'd have like crazy arguments. And now life is still like this, right? But we've definitely, for one, we've learned that just because we're upset or mad at each other, that just giving each other space helps. So like just because we're mad at each other, the other person pissed the other one off, that it's not the end of the world. And that we don't have to come at each other head to head right then in that moment. Like there's like that funny saying of like, we won't go to bed angry. And then like this idea that you have to like stay awake until you resolve it.
We've definitely done that.
And that's not always the best thing. Like sometimes just like giving yourself a chance to just like relax, forget about it. And it is hard to relax, especially when you're upset about it. So I'm not necessarily saying relax, but just give yourself time and space and then come back to it. Because a lot of times you'll realize that you were just, really angry in that. Believe it or not, we're conditioned to be angry. Your body wants to be angry. So sometimes it's just like an outlet for your body to get rid of energy. And maybe there was no real reason to be angry to begin with. And if you can just like give each other a little bit of space to kind of just go about your own things, you kind of just realize like it doesn't even matter. Or that you're not willing, or that it's not worth you being mean or angry at the other person. And maybe there's still an issue, but you can come at it from a calmer state, and especially when you've had a little bit of time to reflect on whatever the argument is. And so, just again, the different things that we've learned over time of just like how to, like in the very beginning, it's like mental and emotional warfare. Like who can beat the other person, both mentally, physically, emotionally. Like when I say beat, I mean just like win the argument or whatever. But now it's like less about winning and just trying to come together and solve whatever.
Yeah, for sure. It can definitely be difficult in the moment to accept the reflection as true because you can be in a reactive state. And I feel like it's almost like a separate identity that takes on these behaviors because you're not conscious or like aware of it. I feel like it can almost be separate from you. And I feel like that separation can almost respond in a way that you wouldn't normally respond. So like whenever I become aware of these things, it almost feels like something else took control for that said period of time. And so whenever someone points it out, it's almost like it needs to defend itself to be able to survive. And it's almost like you don't want to let go of that part of you because you don't know if you can survive without it. So it's like if something traumatic happens to you, you create a defense mechanism. And that defense mechanism is put into place to protect you. And so it believes that it needs to do anything that it can to protect you. And it's based in a good truth. Like it genuinely wants to protect you, but it can distort into a negative behavior or negative pattern in ways that can affect other people around you. So, yeah, like you said, becoming aware that it exists, becoming aware that it can be separate from you, and then becoming aware of where it started. And so that was I remember this one argument that we had, and you were like, how many times are we going to have the same argument? And I'm like, we've had the same argument many, many times. Like, and I was like, why do we keep having the same argument? And then I'm like thinking about all the times that we had the same argument. And you're like, I'm not dealing with you doing this anymore. And I was like, what am I doing? And then I have to become aware of like, okay, what was the argument? Because sometimes you don't even remember the argument. You just go about your day. Well, that happens to me a lot where
Don't put me up in there. I remember.
I have an argument with someone and then I just move on. Like it never even happened. I just go about my day and then just mind my own business until it happens again. And then it happens again, and I just move on about my day. And yeah, so it'd be like, why do you keep doing that? And I'm like, what am I even doing? So then you become aware of what you're doing, and then you think back to like, well, why would I ever do that? And you're like, oh yeah, it's because my mom used to do this. And then you tie it to something and you're like, oh, well, thank you for assisting me in that moment, but this is no longer needed in my life. And you can like put that part of you to rest in a sense, where it's like, we saw that definitely in the movie Soul. It's like she created this huge distortion of like all the negative things that anyone's ever said to her. And it's like you can become aware and like put those things to rest, basically.
Yeah, it's mind blowing that even Talladega Nights has like spiritual stuff in it, right? And that's the same actor that plays in Kicking and Screaming. It's the same guy. Hold on.
Guy with the big old mustache.
No. The big guy with the mustache was the guy that was the dad in Kicking and Screaming. Oh, you were talking about the other guy. No. I'm talking about the main character of both. Hold on.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure in Talladega Nights, like his dad was a one-upper, and and like he abandoned him, and then he came back, and he was like,
Will Ferrell.
yeah,
Will Ferrell. He's the one that plays the main character in Kicking and Screaming, and he's the one doing the monologue about. He's like, and there I was with a clean slate, ready to start my life until I met my dad, until I met this guy, and it's his dad. And then he's Ricky Bobby in Talladega Nights.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, I didn't even tie that together until I was listening to your story, and then I was like, oh yeah, that reminds me of this. So that's pretty funny. Just randomly popped
What
up.
were you saying?
Oh yeah, about like the whole father thing that you brought up. Like his father basically was a one-upper and then told him he'd abandoned him and then told him like, whenever I come back, you better be a champion or something like that, right?
Right. And he was like, if you ain't first, you're last.
Yeah.
And then after he like remembers it his whole life and he always repeats it. And then his dad comes back in his life and he's like, And he's like, but what? He's like, but if you ain't first, you're last. And he's like, who said that? He's like, you told me that. And he's like, well, that's just dumb.
Mm.
He's like, there's second, there's third place. And he's like, I was drunk, Bobby. And it's like so funny. That's so true. It's like people, especially adults, will say like these throwaway comments to people, or to young kids, right? Their kids, young kids. And it's like this innocuous thing. They don't even remember that they did that. But to the kid, it's like this huge moment. Oh man, that reminds me of this time. I remember I had this fucking coach. He wasn't my coach. He was a different coach and he was a scumbag coach. But I just remember one time he's like, yeah, you're just SLOW. You don't stand a chance. And I always think about that. Like, I just can't imagine telling a kid that he's slow and is not good. And it's like to him, like I know he doesn't remember that. He probably doesn't even remember who I am. But that like always stuck with me. I just remember being like, F you, dude. Like fat old dude. Like it's a fat old dude. Literally talking shit to me while I'm out here running multiple miles. And he's just going to stand there with his big old fat belly with his hands in his pockets. And he's just like, yep, you're just SLOW. And to me, that makes sense because it's like, of course, he's like probably pulling it of just like, oh, I'm not like some talent. Specifically referring to cross country. And it was like the first time I had ever even done it. I just didn't want to be a loser. So I was trying stuff out and I ran this cross country. And out of all the kids that did it, I like beat like half the kids. I was like halfway. And it's like, I literally have never ran multiple miles in my life. I thought I did great, but he was just like, yep, you're just SLOW. And I just remember being like, I hate you. And I would always remember that, just like F this guy. I can be faster. I can be fast. And I'm definitely not fast, but again, just that idea of like, yeah, parents and adults will just say something to you that they don't think is a big deal and they're not even present when they say it. And it becomes like this huge thing where you like define your whole life by it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so funny. He's like, well, that's just stupid, Ricky Papa. He's like, there's second place, there's third place. And just leaves him in like the middle of the road. And he's like having a crisis because he held his dad like up to like this high, put him on a pedestal, and held him in such high regard. And he's actually just a drunk asshole. But the cool part about that movie is that he eventually takes responsibility, gets coaching, learns how to fix all of his problems. And man, I'm about to go on a little rant here because I just talked about this to my martial arts group last night because I have 2 young kids that I train with, and so I really find it important to tell them more about just martial arts. And one of the things that I talked about was adventure is going out into the unknown for a high reward, but it involves risk. And that's what life is. If you didn't want adventure, we'd all just sit around and watch TV. But something about being a human craves adventure. And jiu-jitsu is a part of that adventure. Like going to jiu-jitsu class is an adventure. There's risk. You could get hurt. You're going to get beat up, but the reward is very high. And that adventure is much better than the instant gratification of sitting around and watching TV. But in order to go on adventure, you have to take responsibility for yourself. You can't go to jiu-jitsu class if things at home aren't okay. Like what I mean by that, just very basically, is just take like the average person. Like you have to have a job to train jiu-jitsu. If you can't pay the membership, you can't train. There are extenuating circumstances. Some people are fortunate enough where they don't have to pay, but for the most part, for the average person, if you want to train jiu-jitsu, you have to be able to pay for it. I would say actually any adventure that you go on is going to cost money. So in order for you to have adventure, you have to have a job. You have to have some sort of income. You have to take care of yourself. You can't, one of the things that makes me mad is when people that are overweight, they stay overweight and do jiu-jitsu. And I'm not hating on the big guys here. I'm just saying that like you put everyone else at risk because you're willing to have that discipline in your own life. Like to put everyone else at risk just because you want to stuff your face is kind of messed up. But again, to do jiu-jitsu and to be good at it, you have to take responsibility for yourself. You need to do the things outside of jiu-jitsu so that you can come to jiu-jitsu in the right state. Like one of the number one ways to hurt yourself is to wake up from a nap and go straight to jiu-jitsu, or wake up from a nap and go straight to any type of training without warming up, right? So if you do wake up from a nap and go straight to some type of workout, you have to then warm up. You have to do the things that you have to, go through the steps of taking care of your body so that you can continue to do these things. And that's just like very basic in of itself of like martial arts. Like imagine like, again, having a girlfriend or a wife. If you ain't taking care of yourself, you're not going to get anyone of quality, right? You have to keep yourself clean. You have to have worth, whether that like some type of value, whether that's, a job or, having some type of personality. Like you have to be doing things to attract a mate. You have to take care of yourself, your wife, before you can have kids. If you can't take care of your girl, she's not going to want to have kids with you. So it comes down to that in order to go on an adventure, you have to accept responsibility. You can't have adventure without responsibility. And, everyone wants to go on the adventures without the responsibility, right? But you just can't, right? Like you're not going to get a girl if you ain't brushing your teeth. You ain't going to get a girl if you ain't showering. You're not going to be able to function if you're not eating when you're supposed to be eating, right? Like all these like things that seem innocuous and boring, you have to do them. And when you're able to do them, you can go on bigger and bigger adventures. And, there's this, Jordan Peterson talks about this, but like this idea that the idea of God is the idea of adventure, because you can only go out into the unknown and get these high rewards if you're first taking responsibility of yourself. And then this idea of gaining awareness, like the idea of spirituality is to gain awareness. Well, how do you do that exactly? Well, one, like I said, having a kid has been a spiritual experience in of itself. And it's like, I couldn't have had, I guess, you can, but I'm in a position to have a kid now because I've been doing the things I'm supposed to do. And now I have a higher level of awareness. And so like an awareness, what about, you can perceive that as people having an awareness of you, right? Well, in order for people to have an awareness of you, or at least want to have an awareness of you, you have to first take care of yourself. Then you take care of your significant other. Then you take care of your family. And then when you get good at that, then you start taking care of other people in your community. Well, not taking care of them, but you become a part of the community. And then when you become part of the community, you become part of the city or the state. And then your awareness grows more and more because other people are now thinking about you, or you're in their mind because you are so dialed in that you're able to do all these different things. Like that is one way to see as a way to gain awareness. And so, again, just back to the movie that we're talking about, Talladega Nights, when his entire life explodes, he has to go back of doing the basics of taking care of his kids, taking care of his mom, building his family back up. He gets a new girl who's like actually cares about him, because he finds out that his girl didn't really care about him. She just wanted a winner. So then he gets a girl that cares about him, and he goes back to racing, finds his love for racing, and makes the improvements that he needs to. But it's like this whole thing of like, he loses everything to learn to go back and take care of the things that he wasn't taking care of when he was on top of the world. And then he comes back to being the best. And, again, that all goes back into that idea of adventure and taking responsibility for yourself and the things that are within your life. And that by doing that, that's how you can, achieve things and move forward.
That was a lot. Yeah, the call to adventure.
Yes, the call to adventure. And Jordan Peterson makes the argument that that's what God is, the call to adventure, which I think is a fantastic idea. It's like, yeah, it's not this idea of an old guy in the heavens. It's this idea that deep down, we want adventure. And in order to do that, we have to take responsibility. You have to be a responsible human so that you can go out into the unknown.
Yeah, and he says that's like the hero's journey.
Yes.
In the process of knowing yourself.
Okay, so identifying, that was like the first thing, right? And then just to go further, we can go on forever about the different ways to heal it, but one of the biggest ones is like having open and honest communication. That seems like a little obvious, but being able to let your partner know maybe about things that are destructive without like trying to purposely trigger them or get them upset. You can also talk about like creating a safe space. And that essentially just means that like, yeah, I'm not going to I'm not judging you for these things. I'm just trying to help you. Like letting your partner know that you're not against them and you're not trying to make them feel bad. You're just trying to come together so that you both can live better together.
Yeah, we've experienced that where it's like whenever we've tried to open up to each other, it's like, oh, well, if I tell you this, you're just going to use it against me in the future. And it's like, yes, maybe someone has done that to you. Maybe I've even done that to you. But now that you say that, I'm going to try my best not to do that. And then that gives them the permission to open up to you more openly. It's like, yeah, I'm not going to use this against you. I just really want to understand where you're coming from. I want to understand what you're thinking and like getting on the same page together because you can figure out and work through these things way more efficiently together than you can on your own.
Yep. Right. And then we already talked about like identifying specific behaviors. I kind of think that goes back into acknowledging the unhealthy patterns, like identifying the pattern itself. You can also set goals, right? So like just like understanding that you both are just trying to be more aware, right? Like not necessarily like setting a specific goal. You could if that makes sense for your relationship, if the context is right. We don't necessarily set specific goals, but we do have a goal of like not trying to completely destroy this relationship, right? Our goal is to come together and like we have a goal of, being together forever. I know that sounds corny, but we have no interest in splitting up. And so if we see something that's splitting us apart, we both know that deep down we want to stay together. And because we both know deep down that we want to stay together, it's easier for us both to not try as hard to self-destruct. Like if you low-key think that the other person doesn't want to be with you, you will purposely find ways to make that happen. But if you trust that the other person isn't trying to push you away, you can then have the confidence to realize that whatever is upsetting you isn't being done on purpose, and that the main goal for you both is to get past it and work together.
Yeah, that's one big saying that we would always say is like, they're just trying their best, or like that person is doing the best that they can. And like whether that applies to anything, like even the cats, like sometimes the cats will do something stupid, like break something, and you'd be like, why do you do that? And I'm like, he's just trying his best. He's just trying to exist. You can't be mad at him. He's just doing his best in this world. Like, even if it's a person, it's like, why is that person like that? It's like, we have no idea why, but just don't be mad at him for it. Just let him do what he's doing, Like, you can't help everyone. You can only help the people that want to be helped and they're willing to work on themselves. So
another one is establishing healthy boundaries. So that can be just seen as like, hey, just understanding, like giving yourself like a way to operate. Like just because we're arguing doesn't mean we have to completely destroy this whole thing. And there can be a tendency to do that, especially in new relationships. And it's like, if you can just be like, hey, maybe we're mad at each other, but we're not going to do this, or we can try our best not to do this, then you can operate a lot easier with each other especially if you understand like what's triggering, you can like try your best. Like if you know what triggers somebody, you can try your best to avoid that, right? Be like, well, I know if I do this, it's just going to make them more upset, so I'm not going to do that, right? So just like learning what each other's triggers are so that you can better operate, especially when you're both angry or mad or sad. And then like another one that kind of goes with that is like the boundaries thing is like the effective communication skills, right? Like we were saying, it's like we both will do things with words that set the other person off. But if we can do our best to not do that, then it makes things easier. Things are less likely to escalate.
yeah, for sure. And I feel like one big learning moment for me was just learning to like be softer in the moment and like not go head to head, because that's my initial reaction, is to just meet the force with force. And then you're like, well, why can't you just like respond in a nicer tone? And I was like, in my mind in that moment, I was like, that's impossible. I will never fold. Like, I will win this argument. I'll win every single argument after that. And then it's
Tori
like,
have never won an argument.
subjective. So then, yeah, I was just like, okay, well, fine. Maybe you said that for a reason. Maybe I'm supposed to hear it. Maybe I should try to listen to it. And then like over time, you understand like, okay, well, if meeting this situation head on, head first, stubbornly, is not working, then maybe I should just try to fold. And it's like the same thing in martial arts where you learn like to back off. It's like it doesn't make you less of a person. If anything, it makes you more tactful and a better person because you're learning to broaden your responses. You're learning to adjust to the situation and better come to a resolution.
Yep. And I guess like the last thing is just like supporting each other and having patience. Like, again, if you both know that you're in it together, you can at least know that you don't have to act in a way to self-destruct things. And then when you're doing that, you can then just try to support each other and both being better humans. And then a lot of it is just like being patient. It's going to take time. You're not just going to be like, oh, I'm healed now. Oh, this thing that happened to me long ago that I've been dealing with for 10, 15, 20 years is gone now. All right. It's going to take time. You're going to have to keep bringing things up. You're going to have to keep going back over it. But with patience, the communication skills, persistence, it can definitely help you, put you in a much better state than when you started.
Yeah, I truly believe that we can carry trauma from past lifetimes even. I feel like we have karma, and I feel like even in this lifetime, if we don't agree to try to heal it or cope with it, it'll follow us into the next lifetime in some certain way. And then there can be things from the collective consciousness that are affecting us in ways that we're unaware of, and that it becomes an opportunity for you to heal for everyone else around you, not only for yourself. So if you are in a situation where something continually happens, see it as a gift and an opportunity to, hey, I can't make this right. Like choosing to make it right rather than to allow it to affect you negatively.
Yeah, 100%. So we're at 1:45.
I feel like the first 25 minutes wasn't really.
Oh yeah, we did kind of ramble on for quite a bit. Okay, cool. So you wanna is there anything else you wanna do about this before we jump into the stories?
No.
Well, we usually like give like a movie, right, about like the lesson, and I think Talladega Nights is perfect. It's funny, and it really does talk about this. He like goes through a whole thing with his about his dad and how it affects his kids, and like how he had toxic relationships, and then he moves on. So, and then also Kicking and Screaming. That's a funny one. Will Ferrell's a master. That dude is so good. So those are some movies you can watch if you want to kind of learn about past trauma and relationships.
I did want to bring up the movie Trolls because we just recently watched that.
That's right.
And if you are an animated fan like we are, or if you want something to watch with the whole family, Trolls is definitely a great option because
it's the third one, right?
Yeah, the newest one. Because they go through trauma and the way that it affects them in their current lives. Like one of the youngest siblings, he was abandoned by his family, and he continues to carry on that abandonment issue throughout the movie. And then there's another girl that she has a fear of a certain race of people because at one point in the previous movies, they were eating the trolls, or they were like capturing them and stuff like that. So even though as time progressed, they became friends, she secluded herself and will not go near them or trust them. And then as she meets her long-lost sister, she learns how to trust again and opens herself up to the world.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah. The movie that I was going to bring was Here Comes the Boom with Kevin James, where he's a teacher that tries to be a UFC fighter. And there's a really good part where he finally gets a fight in the UFC, and he's like trying to raise money for one of his co-workers. And he finally gets a fight in the UFC, and his coach denies it. And he confronts him about it. Like, why would you turn that fight down? And the coach has a moment with him. Like they're just talking about it. And he is essentially upset because he never got the opportunity to fight in the UFC because he messed his neck up. And it's such a cool part because the main character, Kevin James, he essentially like kind of empathizes with him and just like accepts like his coaches. He's like, you know what, if you don't think I'm ready for this fight, then I trust you. And the coach, like just having a moment to be heard and understood by somebody, like he like essentially like feels a lot better. And he's like, no, he's like, you deserve this. He's like, we're going to the UFC. And it's just like this really cool moment. And I feel like that kind of goes into what we're saying about like just like being made aware of these things. And then hearing someone out a lot of times does a lot. Like just like being empathetic and hearing what someone is going through can be really healing, have like a huge effect on them and can kind of help them deal with that. So being a good listener is a huge part. But yeah, that was my movie. And then we wanted to just do a quick story. We'll do like a breakdown of spiritual stories. You want to go ahead and read yours first? So they're two different like classic anecdotal stories, and I think they're in line with today's topic.
Yeah, they're a little long, so I don't want to recite it from memory, so I'm going to read it off because I want to make sure it's exact. So, the story I'd like to bring up is the story of the stonecutter, which is a parable about contentment and understanding one's place in life. And it says, once upon a time, there was a stonecutter who was dissatisfied with his life and his work. Every day he went to the mountain to cut stones, but he always felt there was something more he should be doing, and he longed for greater power and wealth. One day, while working, he saw a wealthy merchant passing by. The merchant was surrounded by attendants dressed in the finest clothes and admired by everyone. The stonecutter wished, "How I wish I could be a powerful merchant." To his amazement, his wish was granted, and he became a wealthy merchant, enjoying a life of luxury and influence. But soon he realized that even as a rich man, there were limits to his power. One hot day, he saw the sun shining brightly in the sky, and he felt overwhelmed by its heat. He thought, "The sun is far more powerful than I. I wish I could be the sun." Instantly, he became the sun, shining down on the earth and scorched everything below. He felt powerful until one day a large cloud appeared and blocked his rays. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't penetrate the cloud. Frustrated, he thought, "That cloud is mightier than I. I wish I could be a cloud." And so he became a cloud, floating above the land and sending down rain. He soon caused floods and storms, feeling powerful as he controlled the weather. But soon he noticed that the wind could blow him around, scattering him as it pleased. "The wind is more powerful than I," he thought. "I wish I could be the wind." He became the wind, blowing across the land, toppling trees and buildings. He was unstoppable until one day he blew against a mountain and couldn't move it. The mountain was immovable, no matter how hard the wind blew. "The mountain is the most powerful of all," he thought. "I wish I could be a mountain." And so he became a mighty mountain, towering over everything. He was strong and immovable, feeling invincible. But as he stood there, he felt a small tapping at his base. Looking down, he saw a stonecutter chipping away at the rock with his hammer and chisel. In that moment, the stonecutter realized that the simple stonecutter, who worked with skill and patience, was just as powerful as the mountain or the sun. He understood that the true power comes from within, not from wealth, status, or control. And so he became content with who he was. And it says the moral of the story is that we often desire what others have, thinking it will make us happier or more powerful. But true contentment comes from appreciating who we are and the strength we always possess. We already possess.
And this is a good one. And it reminded me of another similar story, and I'll go ahead and tell it. I feel like this one's a classic one. A successful businessman was vacationing in a small coastal village when he saw a fisherman pulling his boat ashore with a few large fish inside. The businessman complimented the fisherman on his catch and asked how long it took him to catch them. "Just a little while," the fisherman replied. "Why don't you stay out longer and catch more fish?" the businessman asked. The fisherman says, "This is enough to meet my family's needs." The businessman then asked, "But what do you do with the rest of your time?" The fisherman smiled and said, "I sleep late, fish a little, and play with my children. Take a nap with my wife, stroll into the village each evening to see my friends, and I have a full and busy life." The businessman scoffed. "I am a Harvard MBA and I can help you. If you spend more time fishing, you could buy a bigger boat, you could catch more fish, and eventually own a fleet of boats. Then, instead of selling your catch to a middleman, you could sell directly to the processor, open your own factory, control the entire process, You could then move to a big city, expand internationally, and become a wealthy man. The fisherman asked, "But how long will this take?" The businessman replied, 15 to 20 years. "And then what?" the fisherman asked. The businessman laughed and said, "Then you can retire, move to a small coastal village, sleep late, fish a little, play with your children, take a nap with your wife, and stroll to the village each evening to see your friends." The fisherman simply smiled, realizing that he was already living the life that the businessman was describing as the final goal. The moral of the story is that success and happiness aren't necessarily found in wealth and ambition, but in appreciating what you already have. It's so true. It's like that idea of, you can get caught up in the rat race. You can even win the rat race, but at the end of it, you're still a rat. And it's just, again, you can always be caught up in having more. And in today's age where Instagram is a thing and social media is a thing, it's so easy to get caught up in comparing and wanting more. Like, oh, this person has this, or this person accomplished this. I can do that. I can have that. And it's a dangerous thing, because it within you will build this anxiety of like always not having enough. But if you can take a moment, you can realize that you have everything that you need. And a lot of times when people are struggling, they refuse to be aware of that. Like this idea of like, I remember talking to this person and I was like telling them that like lives are full of highs and lows. And they were like, "Oh, I'm still waiting on the highs in my life." And it's like, you have a job, you have a place to live, you have friends, you have food. Like, how do you not have highs in life? It's like a matter of perspective. And I feel like that kind of goes in line with what we're saying. Like, if you can, like, being present and being appreciative of what you have, that will definitely help in dealing with past traumas and relationships.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed over the span of my life how prayer has played effect, and seeing the difference in prayer from when you're young to the present, and how in the beginning you were always wishing for something that you don't have. And then as you grow older, you realize just to be grateful. Like anytime I have prayer now, I'm just saying like, thank you for everything I have. Thank you for this. Thank you for that. And if I do want something, it's well thought over and something that I'm like truly desiring and something that I can see helping me in the future. It's not just like a small wish that I think that I want.
Absolutely. And that's it, guys. Man, we appreciate y'all tuning in. Thank y'all so much. We love y'all.